All right, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Griffin Art Projects is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo nations, and we are honored and grateful to undertake our work here. So thanks so much for joining us for Imperfect Constellations, moderated by Karen Tam as a special preview event for the Worldings virtual conference. I have just a few quick notes before we jump right into today's presentation. So my name is Jazz Keeler, and I am the Contract Virtual Programs Coordinator at Griffin Art Projects. And I wanted to mention that we have CC Live transcription enabled for today's presentation. So if you would like to see captions displayed, you can enable this by selecting the CC closed captions button at the bottom of your screen. I also wanted to mention that we are live streaming today's event on Griffin Art Project's Facebook page. So if you happen to be having any technical issues at all with the Zoom interface, you can watch this live event on Griffin Art Project's Facebook page at this link. And I'll just go ahead and stop sharing my screen. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we are in webinar format today, and that just means that we cannot see or hear audience members, but we do invite you to get in touch with us using the chat dialog box at the bottom of your screen. And we will also have time for questions at the very end of today's presentation. So if at any point you have a question pop into your head for one of our presenters, feel free to write it at any time in the Q&A dialog box, which is actually separate and just to the left of the chat. You'll also have the option to ask your questions out loud. And if that is your preference, we invite you to raise that yellow virtual hand at the bottom of your screen, and we can give you the option to unmute. I did want to just mention that we are recording today's webinar. So if you do choose to ask your questions out loud, your voice will be captured on that audio recording. Okay, so that is it for my notes, and I am delighted to introduce Elder and Knowledge Keeper Carolyn Moore, who will be welcoming us today. So Carolyn, I will go ahead and spotlight your video. There we go.
Is anybody else having problems hearing her?
Carolyn, I think, oh, you don't seem to be on mute, but we can't hear you.
Oh, that's why when I was asking a question, you couldn't hear me. Sorry, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Oh, great. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Carolyn Moore. I walk with two spirit names, Blue Sky Woman, Morning Star, and I'm from the Deer Clan. I introduce myself to you, but also to the creator as Oshawashko Gishko Kwe, Wabano Nung Dijnakaz Washkashi Dam. And I'm here to welcome everyone and to say a prayer. And one of my first teachings, I've been walking this way now for about 25 years. And one of the first teachings I ever received was the four colors of man, the medicine wheel. And with that, I was taught that we were all going to come together one day and into the center with the creator. And that is coming true today. I see it more and more. I'm so glad I'm living at this time that the old ones told us and foretold us that this was going to be. I was taught to respect all four colors of man. I was taught to respect the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they dress, and the way they pray. But most importantly, I was taught to respect their elders and to learn from them. So I do have a ball of sage here, and I would like to start with imagining that you have that little ball of sage in your hand, and I'm going to do a virtual smudge. We call it a dry smudge. This is for places that we can't have smoke. So I use the dry smudge. So what I'd like you to do is to imagine that the smoke is going around you, and first you go over your head, and that's to get rid of the negativity around you. And then you do your mind, and that's to think good thoughts. Your eyes, so you could see with kindness. Your ears, so you can hear everything in a good way. Our mouths, the most deadliest weapon in the world, we always want to speak with kindness. Our hearts, because everything comes and goes from the heart. And then our whole being. And that's just so that we don't think that we're better than anyone else. So when I greet you and I shake your hand or I give you the elbow with these times, it's, you know, I'm sincere because you know I smudged today. And so I wanted to start this off in a good way with that kindness and that caring. I'll say a prayer. Creator, so shawishko gishko kwe wabanunang dishnaka sawashkashi dudan. Oh Creator, as we call in our helpers, our loved ones that's gone on before us, our guiding spirits, help us today, Creator. Help us throughout this whole time and next weekend also. Walk with us, guide us, and know that we're all going to come together with your love, Creator, and your caring and sharing, and keep our journey safe, Creator, always. Hoho miigwech, all my relations. Thank you, everyone. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. We will now hear from Griffin Art Projects Director Lisa Baldissera and Urban Shamans Director Dana Warren.
Thank you so much, Chaz, and thank you so much, Carolyn, for your beautiful welcome this morning. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you and with our wonderful partner, Dana Warren at Urban Shaman, for the duration of our conference. We're so fortunate to have this wonderful partner in the work. And I also want to honor the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories that we find ourselves on at Griffin Art Projects of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Musqueam, and Stolo nations. Thank you for allowing us to do our work here. We are very grateful as well for the supportive partners for the duration of our conference. We have 3 partners, and I'm just going to shout out to them as well. The Bag Factory, who is, all partners are promoting and endorsing the conference. Bag Factory is a nonprofit contemporary visual art organization in Newton, Johannesburg, who provides studio space to artists. It's a cross-generational community that has also an artist residency program, the David Kolowane Award, and regular exhibitions that showcase the work of new artists. So we're very excited that they will be presenting later in the conference next weekend. Also, founded by William Kentridge, is the Center for the Less Good Idea, which aims to find the less good idea by creating and supporting experimental, collaborative, and cross-disciplinary arts projects. And we all know that the less good ideas come to us often, and how exciting that we're in an artistic process that allows us to actually create generative work in community from these less good ideas. And we also thank the Faculty of Media Art and Performance at the University of Regina for supporting this. Thank you to Ray Stason and to David Garneau for their support of this project as well. And thank you. Over to Dana.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for doing this project. It's been a long time coming, and I'm so happy for you that you finally realized the project. I just want to thank Halakton and Carolyn for starting the day off. It's so amazing to have these incredible words. Just kind of puts everybody in the right mood, I guess. I want to also acknowledge that Carolyn and I are on Treaty 1 land. So I just want to acknowledge the ancestral nations that are around the city here in Winnipeg, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. And also that I do a water acknowledgement now because this current exhibition that we have at Urban is really important, and hopefully everybody will be around to hear it later on this week, next Sunday actually. The city here accesses its water from this artist's her territory, so Shoal Lake 40. So I want to acknowledge that we get our water from that as well. So I also want to thank our funders. We get Winnipeg Arts Council, Manitoba Arts Council, Canada Council. I want to thank Griffin Art Projects for inviting us to this, and Jazz for all her work on this. She's worked really, really hard and made everything so smooth. It's been really easy to put this together on my side, but yeah. And yeah, and just a thank you to everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited to get this going, and welcome to our international partners. It's really, really amazing to have South Africa as part of this. It's so cool. So great to see everybody. Yeah, let's get it going.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Dana and Lisa. So now throughout the virtual conference, we've planned 3 10-minute micro presentations, and these we're calling our spotlight features. And during these micro presentations, we'll be handing over the platform to local BIPOC and Indigenous organizations nominated by conference collaborators and partners as an opportunity for audience members to learn more about the incredible work that they do. So we're super thrilled to introduce Brendan Galley and Hassan Ashraf from Take Home BIPOC Arts House in Winnipeg. So Brendan and Hassan, I invite you to turn on your videos and I will hand over the spotlight to each of you. Let's see. Perfect.
Okay. Woohoo. Okay, thanks, Jazz. I hope people can hear me all right. Cool. Hassan, are you there? All right. Oops. I don't know what that image is, but I think
Hassan's video might just be connecting Brendan.
okay.
Do you want to perhaps kick things off and I will add Hassan back in once his video loads?
For sure, yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
So we have 10 minutes, so we'll try to be good with our time here. So I can just start by introducing myself. My name is Brendan Galley. I was born and raised here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, also Treaty 1. So we were very happy to receive an invitation from Dana. And so to come here to sort of talk about the things that we've been working on in our little gallery studio space for the past year. I guess a little bit about how we or who we are. So Take Home BIPOC Arts House is a smaller gallery studio space that's located in the Art Space building in Winnipeg Center. Myself and Hassan, who will be joining us shortly, are two of a collection of people who are working to organize this space. Other people include our Annie Beach, Sapphire McLeod, and now as well Ren Lam for this summer as well. So we were, I guess, a bit about the story of how we got here today. We were approached by Carfax, Manitoba in the summer of 2020. There was a available space that opened up in the Art Space building, and we had long conversations between a group of younger or emerging BIPOC artists in Winnipeg around what the arts community needed from Hey, Hassan. I'm just talking a little bit about how we first started Take Home.
Thank you.
We're talking. No, it's all good. we were talking a little bit about what was happening around the world around race issues and race matters, and specifically within the arts community here as well. And that first conversation that we had with CARFAC Manitoba was, I guess, presenting an opportunity, and that opportunity was a space where we would have the authority, or at least the ability to exercise our artistic ways of, I guess, being freely in a physical space that was static. I gotta apologize as well. I just got my second dose yesterday, so I'm a bit fuzzy today. What we've done so far, I guess, is with support from donors as well as grants we've applied to, we were able to host a show or an exhibition within our space in the month of February, partnering with a collective of Black artists here in Winnipeg as well called Kinfolk. And we featured 2 artists who were from Winnipeg as well, Glody Bahati and Bria Fernandez. Glody working in photo and Bria as a painter. And during that period, we were able to see over, I think, 50 something visitors during a period where there was a lot of restrictions happening. So we booked by appointment and there was an overwhelming response from our community. I'll pass it off to Hassan.
Thanks, Brendan. After the Kinfolk show, it was the overwhelming response really encouraged us and validated all the work that we did last year to make the space a possibility. And since then, we've been working towards our upcoming programming, which is a few shows planned in fall with a group of BIPOC artists from Pretty One, and we're hoping to collaborate with other collectives like Parents Collective, which is another BIPOC collective based in Winnipeg, to do some programming. And as time goes, we're hoping to collect funds, fundraise, and start a mentorship program, which will be a long-term program to just welcome BIPOC artists of all ages, and to be able to come to a space in the city and work on their skills, learn their skills, collaborate with each other, and work with us. Yeah, and it's been a pretty tough working during the pandemic and creating programming. But we took our space and the idea of Cape Home to work during the pandemic, so we were kind of prepared for it, and we're hoping that things will open up in the near future so we can start building our community and start knowing all the folks, all the BIPOC folks who'd like to make art and contribute. So we can lay foundations for further spaces to open for the collectives to start, because there's a huge lack of such spaces in Winnipeg. Yeah, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, and so I guess Hassan, you used the phrase, we're not the be-all, end-all solution towards solving barriers that BIPOC artists face when practicing, but we hope to at least provide some sort of like support and resources where necessary, and hopefully that does lead to more spaces and something that we can actually see change in. And we're not also the first people to be contributing to this kind of work, where we are either in those original meetings with CARFAC Manitoba. It was Divya Mehra, who had I sort of created space for us within those conversations to get programming in this space secured for emerging artists to engage with. And so we also do want to, pay respects, or at least, recognize the work that Divya was able to do to create a path forward for newer or emerging artists to come out of the woodwork. Did I just say the last thing, Hassan? Is that right? Was that our final point?
I think so.
Yeah, I guess I can say what else that we do not need to talk about, but we did want to talk about was that this is a new project that we're all undertaking currently, and we're all sort of coming in pretty fresh to I guess the administrative side of running a gallery in the art space, and navigating both like arts institutions, but as well as grant agencies. And so for the past year, we've been pretty grateful to operate by donations, and as well as some grants that were afforded to us during this year. But we can't continue this work without more donations, so that we can make sure that artists are being compensated appropriately. So I think Jazz posted some of our information in the chat. So feel free to share that information amongst your communities, and this would give us the ability to create more opportunities for artists in the future. That's my last point. I don't know if you have anything else to say, Hassan. I think we have 1 minute or less then.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Dana, for inviting us, Jazz, for making this space, and we're grateful for this space to talk about.
I'm so happy you guys could participate. Thank you guys so much, Brendan and Hassan, and take home.
Thank you.
Yeah, get those donations in.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brendan and Hassan. So delightful to hear from you today. And thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. So we are now ready to jump into today's panel, Imperfect Constellations. I wanted to mention that Griffin would gratefully like to acknowledge our support from North Van Reck Culture and Canadian Heritage, as well as the Griffin Foundation. So I am delighted now to introduce you to today's moderator, Karen Tam. And I'm going to add Karen to the spotlight with me here so I can introduce her. Dr. Karen Tam has recently joined the Griffin team as adjunct curator, contributing her skills, insights, and talents to the development of Griffin's public programs. Karen Tam is a Montreal-based artist and curator whose research focuses on the various forms of constructions and imaginations of cultures and communities through her installation work, in which she recreates spaces of Chinese restaurants, karaoke lounges, opium dens, curio shops, and other sites of cultural encounters. Since 2000, Karen has exhibited her work and participated in residencies in North America, Europe, and China. And Karen holds an MFA in sculpture from the School of Art Institute of Chicago and a PhD in cultural studies from Goldsmith University of London. So thank you so much, Karen, and over to you.
Thanks, Jazz. Thanks so much for all your organization and work on this conference. I just want to also extend thanks to Lisa and Dana for your welcome remarks and for including this panel as part of the Worldings conference. Thanks also to Elders Carolyn and Hoyle Acton for sharing your words of welcome, prayer, and welcome song. And finally, thank you to Hassan and Brendan for introducing us to Take Home BIPOC Art House, and look forward to all your future programming and projects. So while we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to just take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, the protectors of the land and waters on which Jojega, Montreal is located, and on whose unceded ancestral land I'm grateful to live and work on as a racialized non-Indigenous guest. So imperfect constellations. Constellations enable us to perceive relations between objects, between stars, between ideas. They connect to spirit points, bring them together to form a system, a philosophy, or a community of ideas. History is always fragmented, and we draw the connections and construct meanings and stories from these fragments. In one of Griffin Art Project's recent public events, artist Gord Hill reminds us that history is important to the culture of resistance. What are the representations of racialized and diasporic communities that circulate in the wider dominant Canadian culture? How do these reinforce the colonial project and gaze? How do BIPOC artists address the cultural legacy of colonialism, of imperialism, and the consequences of exploitation while standing in solidarity with Indigenous groups as racialized and diasporic settlers on Turtle Island? In the practices of each of the imperfect constellations panelists, art is a form of creative resistance that disrupt the colonial narrative. They interrupt the way knowledge is generated, history is told and remembered. Marissa Largo's research and community engaged work aims to draw solidarities between Indigenous decolonizing movements and the decolonial diaspora aesthetics of Filipinx artists in Canada. Pamela Matheru explores the politics of archives and how BIPOC artists and cultural workers navigate and push back against exclusionary archival practices. I think of Jacques Derrida's remarks on how memory and the archive are manipulated, and whoever holds the archives has the power to interpret them. An archive is not a thing of the past, nor is it about the past. The question of the archive is the question of the future and how histories will mean and be seen. Through his work, Marija Kitenge Banza reflects on the legacies and diasporic dispersals of Black histories and the negotiations with identity, memory, and place within the context of colonialism, specifically Belgium's violent colonization and exploitation of the Congo. To address notions of belonging and the systemic racism experienced by communities of color, artists and collectives such as Love Intersection are creating important spaces for queer, BIPOC, diasporic individuals and communities to share and produce their own stories, narratives that aren't being told and are missing from mainstream culture. In today's presentations and conversations with these artists, researchers, educators, activists, and archivists will constellate around reframing art, history, and education within dominant colonial narratives while creating new frameworks to produce and uplift community and other knowledge systems. As Largo states, for the racialized and gendered subject, to be seen does not beget empowerment, but rather power comes from the ability to choose the terms of one's visibility. So to start off our conversation and panel, I'll just introduce Marissa. So Dr. Marissa Largo is a researcher, artist, curator, and educator whose work focuses on the intersections of race, settler colonialism, and Asian diasporic cultural production. She earned her PhD in social justice education from the University of Toronto and holds degrees in visual arts and education from York University and has a master's degree in art education from Concordia University. She is co-editor of Diasporic Intimacies, Queer Filipinos and Canadian Imaginaries, and also serves as the Canada area editor of the Journal of Asian Diasporic Visual in the Americas. Her forthcoming book, Settling Imaginaries, Filipinx Contemporary Artists in Canada, examines the work and oral histories of artists who imagine Filipinx subjectivity beyond colonial logics. And as a visual artist, Marissa's work has been presented in venues across Canada, including A Space Gallery, Open Gallery at OCAD University, Royal Ontario Museum, Royal Pride Toronto, and Montréal Art Culturel. She has just been appointed as Assistant Professor of Creative Technologies at York University. So over to you, Marissa.
Thanks so much, Karen. Thank you, Karen and Griffin Arts Project, Urban Shaman, Carolyn and Willacton for that beautiful opening, and to my fellow panelists for holding space today for these important conversations to take place. I would like to start by acknowledging the land upon which much of my work takes place, the ancestral lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. I am grateful for the opportunity to carry out my creative and intellectual work on Turtle Island, the present day home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples, and respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in forging decolonial relations with Indigenous and other peoples within Turtle Island and beyond. My talk today for Imperfect Constellations is called Unsettling Imaginaries, Decolonial Creative Practices for Indigenous, Black, and POC Communities in Canada. I'll talk a little bit about my personal context and then share examples of my research creation. And then I look forward to engaging with conversation with the audience today and with my fellow panelists. So just a little bit about myself. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, researcher, curator, and educator whose work focuses on the intersections of race, gender, settler colonialism, and Asian diasporic cultural production. Using art as inquiry, participatory methods, and oral histories combined with theories in contemporary art criticism and equity studies, I foster my analytic of decolonial diaspora aesthetics as a way to reimagine more ethical ways of seeing, being, thinking, and making. I'm particularly concerned about the oppressive realities that exist for queer, Indigenous, Black, people of color, and women of color, communities to which I belong or I am an accomplice to, and how these communities and their desires work towards future, for just futures. Working primarily with Filipinx in Canada, I think about how the artwork of racialized and diasporic communities arise from experiences of non-belonging, which include forms of exclusion such as racism, sexism, heterosexism, and classism. These artists and community members take their experiences of exclusion and make them productive through art. Their art and oral histories, and those of my own, are counter-narratives to the colonial discourses that persist in Canada. So I'm going to show you a little bit of some of my past and current projects. I'm currently working on a manuscript for the University of Washington Press. It's a manuscript based on my dissertation called Unsettling Imaginaries, the Decolonial Diaspora Aesthetic of Filipinx Contemporary Artists in Canada. And in this, I think about this new theoretical framework called decolonial diaspora aesthetics. And it aims to unsettle conventional artistic and educational understandings of racialized Indigenous subjects within the context of the settler colonial nation. I trace the oral histories of Filipinx new media artists, painters, sculptors, and animator filmmakers in Canada, whose experiences of various forms of exclusion give rise to works of art that unsettle limiting norms and stereotypes. And very quickly, these artists are Julius Poncelet Manipul, who works with images from Western erotica to reconfigure this notion of of a Filipinx queer diasporic identity. Kudel Rosario, who was a Vancouver-based sculptor and now Montreal-based, and she works with the detritus, the refuse of Vancouver's garbage to recreate these beautiful organic sculptures. Marigold Santos, who works with Filipino folkloric figures such as the aswang, this vampiric shape-shifting, fearsome mythological creature, which she then recuperates as a feminist symbol for a decolonial identity formation. And then finally, Leslie Subnet, who is an animator and works with images from memory and from her culture to create these diasporic narratives. So I'm also so these four artists, they push against and they exceed the limiting imaginaries of the settler colonial state. When I write about these artists, I think about their practice in terms of decolonial diaspora aesthetics. And this involves queering the dominant aesthetic and ideologies that center privilege and power. And in doing so, they honor the repressed, hybrid, multiple, and entangled aesthetics and subjectivities that are formed and informed by multiple colonialisms and diasporas. These artists enter diasporic affect, painful memories, devalued aesthetics that do not exist exclusively in the West or the East. These sensibilities are entangled, embodied, and intersect with multiple colonialisms. Their ambivalence then becomes, in what Walter Mignolo's words state, that an act of invention or world making that supports refused ways of being. I think about how their practice as Filipinx contemporary artists in Canada offer powerful pedagogical opportunities that attend to the complexities and struggles brought on by diaspora, race, and non-belonging. The art that emerges from this discontent is transformative. It's excised from the secret shame of their hearts and minds, leading to healing, and circulates in the public sphere so that others may learn and relate to such experiences. Their art exceeds victimization narratives, and while occupying marginality, they are able to transcend it through their own artistic agency. These artists are imagining more ethical forms of belonging within and beyond the settler colonial nation, and draw solidarities among racialized and diasporic people, particularly queer and trans folks, women, and Indigenous of Turtle Island, and in the Philippines. I attend to questions of identity, difference, and visibility politics from an anti-racist, feminist, queer, and post-colonial perspective. Methodologically, I combine contemporary art criticism and cultural studies with oral history to demonstrate how their work and narratives are productively disruptive and ultimately pedagogical. I'd like to share with you another major publication that I co-edited with Robert Diaz and Fritz Pino. It's called Diasporic Intimacies, Queer Filipinos, and the Canadian Imaginaries. And this anthology chronicles the practices and narratives of queer Filipinx activists, frontline community workers, scholars, and artists in their vital contributions to Canadian society. This groundbreaking project represents the building of new transdisciplinary archives that highlight the need for queer, transgressive, utopian practices that bring to bear histories of empire, colonialism, and global migration, which occurred on the fronts of curatorial work, research, and frontline community activism. So these are images from the opening that happened in OCAD-U in 2015. For close to 20 years now, my art practice has been a way for me to critically explore issues with regards to the struggles brought on by diaspora, as experienced by Filipinx in Canada and transnationally. While I was completing my BFA at York University, I produced an artwork called The Nanny Project. It arose from my experience of teaching in a community center in Toronto with economically privileged families, where I became acquainted with several Filipina domestic workers who would drop off and pick up the children for whom they cared. They were all Filipina, but due to global inequalities and the conditions of our presence in Canada, we were not equal. As my approach to art making sees the creative process as a form of inquiry and relationality, the Nanny Project provided a context for sharing their struggles and aspirations, and the Nanny, their aspirations and their conditional belonging in Canada. So it included, it was a bookwork that included lithographic portraits of the women, screen prints of the artwork produced by the children in their care, and also audio excerpts from the women. And I came to realize that simply being visible does little to imbalance the material and discursive injustice that exist. Echoing feminist scholar Nancy Fraser, the politics of recognition must be connected to the redistribution of rights and resources. One must also do the work. I became aware of my own agentive role as a Filipina in Canada, participating in the creation of culture and knowledge. This led me to become more involved in community organizations that focused on the rights of Filipinx migrant workers and youth in Canada. This led me to pursue my master's work in Montreal, my thesis, which was called From the Pearl of the Orient to Uptown, a creative arts-based inquiry with Filipino youth activists in Montreal, examined the ways in which Filipino youth activists mobilized art production and videography to express their struggles. Their individual narratives of their mother's deprofessionalization through Canada's caregiver program, the ensuing years of family separation, and being pushed out of the school system and into factory or service work were collectivized and emerged as patterns of systemic racism propped up by the repressive labor and immigration policies. Through participatory action research, I concluded that the artists working with activist community groups may work as a curator of a creative process or as a gatherer who can produce art in their own aesthetic, informed by community needs and support for collective goals for politicization and community action. And so this also culminated in an exhibition at the My Gallery in downtown Montreal. Karen, can I just ask for a time check?
Yes, there you have just like 30 seconds left.
Okay, thanks so much. So just to close up, I'd like to quickly share a curatorial project that I have on the horizon, opening in September 2021. I'm curating an exhibition called Elusive Desires with Nestle and Florence Yee. And the show is about two queer femme Asian diasporic artists and how their visualities really work to unsettle settler colonial logics that exist in Markham. And through installation and textile and multimedia, they're going to take over the gallery and show different ways of being in the world that do not subscribe to assimilationist logics and nationalist narratives. And so that's on the horizon in the weeks to come. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the dialogue that will follow.
Thanks, Marissa, for your presentation. Next, we have Pamela Mithru, who is a settler of Punjabi descent from Northwest India, born in Birmingham, England, based in Toronto, and holds a BA in Visual Arts and a Fine Arts Bachelor in Education from York University. Approaching contemporary art from the position of critical pedagogy and using an interdisciplinary and intersectional feminist lens, her work culminates in various forms, including installation art, social practice, collage, and experimental media. A recipient of the Toronto, Ontario, and Canada Art Council's grant, Pamela has screened and exhibited her work locally, regionally, nationally. Recently, she was awarded the Contact Festival's 2020 Bertinsky's Photo Book Award, the 2019 Images Festival Homebrew Award, and the 2019 Ontario Association of Art Galleries Exhibition of the Year Award for a critically acclaimed debut solo exhibit, One of These Things Is Not Like the Other, at A Space Gallery in Toronto. Currently in research and development is Where Were You in '92? A new project slated to debut in October of this year at the Archives of Ontario, an invitation by Archive by Counter Archive. Iterations will continue between 2022 to 2023 at the Orr Gallery in Vancouver, Agnes Etherington Art Centre in Kingston, Optica in Montreal, and the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. Over to you, Pamela.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for holding space today, Urban Shaman and Griffin Art Projects. I'm really excited and to present with you. Some of you might have heard my story, but well, you'll just hear it again. And I might have a little bit of tech flow issues, but bear with me as I share screens. So I really loved Karen's introduction in terms of how I have started to investigate through looking at archives. I never really was someone who took up archives from a very long time. It's something that's quite recent. And what I'm showing you is visuals from my 2019 show at A Space, and where I investigated the bulk of my work that is now leading up to Where Were You in '92. So I'm gonna just head over there, so bear with me. So I started with some found tapes, and I acquired these tapes in probably 13, almost close to 14 years ago, and they just sat in my care, in my storage, because I did not really receive any, even though I've been active in Toronto for 27 years, I just really didn't receive any invitations to be in any significant group exhibits or as well as solo. So when I was offered this solo in 2016, it really trumped me in terms of what I would present as a solo artist, because along the lines I have been building myself up around pedagogy, critical pedagogy, and investigating critical pedagogy intersecting with contemporary art, and also the complicatedness of group culture, perhaps aka collectives, art collectives. And I had really started to investigate the power dynamics of that experience after I experienced something in the summer of 2010 at my very first artist residency at Plug-in Contemporary Art, their summer institute, with a lead artist that was there, that was flown in from the UK. So here are the tapes that I'm just going to share with you. As you can see, they're labeled Identity in a Foreign Place, and looking at these tapes lead to a lot of the investigation, the inquiry that I, artistic inquiry that I kind of went through. So Identity in a Foreign Place, October 1st, 1993, this is a analogous program to a larger show, which I'll mention in a little bit. But you can see that there's 4 names. I did not recognize these 4 names on the first tape, and on the second tape, M.G. Vasanji, who is marked absent, but the reading was by Judith Osborne, but he actually does end up on the second tape. And I was just really intrigued when I found these tapes in a art refuse place that is run by the Toronto District School Board, who is my employer. And I was there with a former student now, who we were looking for materiality for installation projects. And I came across this box that was identified with AGO refuse from the marketing department. So posters, postcards, bookmarks, some items around education, not too much, but I happened to find these 2 tapes, and I just thought it was really odd. They're labeled Identity in a Foreign Place. I understand who M.G. Vasanji was even in 13, 14 years ago. And then the date, right? If you look at the date, 1993, it's pretty much my coming of age around identity politics in Toronto. So, and they're also not a copy, but they're marked master and original. So I thought, this is interesting. Now I hung on to them, and fast forward to, this is the second one. Fast forward to 2016, I'm asked to do this solo, and I decide to go through my personal archive of, or I call it archive, but really it's just amassed treasures that I have found. And I bring these tapes out, and I thought, well, maybe it's a good time to figure out what's on these tapes. So I transferred the tapes, and I happened to just actually, after I got the tapes back, or the files back, the video files back, I happened to focus on Lakshmi Gill's first 7.5 minutes of her spoken word talk, or her talk. And this program, I found out after some thorough investigation, was a parallel program, as I said, to a AGO contemporary art series called Perspectives 93, and it happened to be organized by the Goethe Institute with the AGO. Lakshmi Gill happens to be a very alive and well writer based in BC, and she is of Filipino and Punjabi descent, so she's mixed race. And something to note, because as I then just simply queried the librarian and the archivist, like, what happened on these dates? And there was this thing. Did you guys have any part in it? Did any staff at the time? They're very unaware about what the event was. Eventually they called me back into the library and they said, we found some documentation, but no, there's nothing, there's no audio recording and there's no video. And I said, well, of course you don't have the video. And when I went in, I said, I have something to show you. So then I slapped the tapes down on the desk and they were just stunned, and or I might be exaggerating, not so stunned, but stunned. And they basically realized that they connected it to the Perspectives 93 show. And I'm not sure if you can everybody see these two files? Can someone give me a... Yes?
We're seeing your file names, Pamela, but not the images.
Oh, 1 second then. New share then. Sorry about that. So here you see two files. Perspectives 93 in the year 93 featured two contemporary Canadian artists. You might recognize Mike Alexier and then Lanny Maestro. Lanny Maestro now resides in France, I believe. And you are now looking at an image from my iPhone, where I documented the size of Mike Alexier's artist file at the Artist Files in AGO library. As well, on the right side, this is Lanny Maestro's. There were 4 reviews that came out for this show called Perspectives 93. The year 93 was very, very interesting because along the same year, that was the 1993 Whitney Biennial. So as the 1993 Whitney Biennial, if anybody recalls from their own memory of learning contemporary art in North America, was very significant Whitney Biennial because it was the first one with significant number of women of color, queer artists, and I think as well men of color. And it really did shake the bedrock of the contemporary art world in New York City. So back to Toronto, I guess they wanted to do something around identity. Now they chose Mike Alexier, who, at this point in 2021 is quite a well-known figure, but Lanny, not so much. When you ask young artists or whatnot, they have to do a little work around and I think they quite have to do a lot of work. They're quite challenged around recalling who the contemporary artists are, the BIPOC ones are in Canada. But I think worldwide over, African-American artists or artists from, let's say, Swana or Latin America, Latinx artists as well, there's quite a recall for who is happening and where they're going. Of course, the biennial circuit helps, right? So you can understand that I'm looking at these two piles going, something that's kind of striking me as, all right, well, obviously, the size of this file, I know artists have to contribute to their artist files at the AGO, but it seems that curators and the librarians also contribute to them. So why is it that Lanny, who is 5 years older, also attended NASCAD as Mike Alexier did? Why is her file so thin? Now, the 4 reviews that came out about Perspectives 93, all white reviewers were fairly confused. And then I came across this other interesting article, and it was the one that was the glaring one for me, where John Bentley Mays, may he rest in peace, I think, he is talking about...
Sorry, Pamela, we're still not seeing the image.
Okay, 1 second. Now?
Perfect.
He writes in the Globe and Mail, not too far off from the opening of the show, that, you know, flip sides of the new narcissism. And just to make it short and sweet, he refers to Micah. Oh, I'm sorry. He refers to Micah as a modern day Caravaggio and whatnot, and he refers to Lanny as someone who's whining, and those, I say that with quotations. And on the tapes, you also hear Lakshmi Gill talk about how most of the world powers have not necessarily investigated, but they have colonized and approached the Philippines with their own interests, of course, to extract. And, you know, I didn't necessarily think that this image looked like something that was modern day and Caravaggio-like. So clearly, you know, I then started to really look closely at the files and how the two artists were kind of treated in the reviews. And I ended up basically looking at, you know, also this was in Lanny's file, but not necessarily Micah's file, was this letter to the editor. And it's quite telling.
Pamela, I'm sorry, you have 1 minute left.
Oh boy, okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's okay, that's okay. Quite telling around, this is written by Clive Robertson, and he wrote a scathing letter to the editor, to the Globe and Mail, defending Lanny and criticizing Mr. Mays's approach around informing the readership and painting Lanny with a, you know, what I would say a very critical, deeply critical a brush. Sorry, my phone's going off. So I will leave the rest to where I went with it. I'm sorry if I have 1 minute. I'm just gonna, do I still have a minute? Yes, no? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'm gonna just quickly do something for you guys. It's gonna go by fairly quickly. So I took that as a marker in the show to create.
Sorry, Pamela, we're not seeing the images.
Oh,
so
God.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Not a problem. We can do this. And okay, how about now?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So this is a transliterated title. This is Punjabi on the side, and then this is in English. One of these things is not like the other. And I used the 7.5 minutes on the tape to create a snapshot of the 90s, early 90s identity politics at the time. And I coupled that where I asked myself, my partner, my life partner, who is also my graphic producer and designer, she had quite enlarged the articles, both the review and the letter to the editor, recreated them so the viewer can get a gist of my found articles. So let's call this the documents room. And then this was something I lived through. I was at the Yonge Street protest for a murder of a young Black Canadian man in full daylight by a plainclothes officer. So, you know, that narrative doesn't change, the police brutality on Black and brown lives. So from there was an uprising, right? Because the youth were very unsettled, and this is not, institutions were not somewhere that would really readily invite us. I'm probably just shy of 20 at this point in my life, in May of 1993 when this happened. So 93's got a lot going on, not just in the institutions, but in the streets. And then what I did find is that I had to really think hard, and where did I see culture and people like me, but on multicultural television. So I then investigated multicultural television as an outlet for people like me. And then in the other room, I created another protagonist in the show is Amrita Shergill, who is India's first modern feminist painter. And I found an article in the summer of 2018 that basically talks about her illicit botched abortion in which she died, and art historians do not recall that at all, her mental health, and then also her queer relationships. So things started to come together where I ended up taking 4 female protagonists and creating a container of care. And here what I have, what you're looking at is a installation by not just by myself, but my collective that I share projects with, Sister Co-Resistor, and then also 24 other BIPOC artists who are BIPOC and feminist artists and queer artists who are in my decolonial art collection. So I'll just quickly show you some of the constellations that I created. This is called Mind, Body, and Spirit. This one's called Kinship. This is Art and Politics, and this is Nestle's collective. Asian, yeah, oh, sorry, I forget their bad art store or something. Sorry about that. And then also, this is called Negotiations, where we look at gender and sexuality, race, ethnicity, mental health. So what I ended up doing was creating a constellation with not just my work, because this show was my first solo in Toronto after 25 years of experience laboring for the art world, quote unquote. And I decided to create a constellation of my peers and people I admire in the art world, where they have kept my sanity because of the whiteness that is just basically shoved down my throat, from K to 12 education to university, and of course, living and working in the contemporary art world in Toronto. Of course, things are changing, but not really fast enough for me. This batik is called Dear Amrita. This is an homage to Amrita, where if her life was in struggle, her spirit does not have to struggle so much. And this container, or I'll call it a batik, is a informal, formal artist and facilitator-led space, which was occupied for 6 weeks with invited guests, where we had political discussion, social justice issues, thinking about futurities with South Asia Art. And I think Noor Bungu might be in the room, but she led looking at the future of, rather than leaving on a negative note from the other room, thinking through positivity. And this is Queering Takuranto. So really starting off with thinking through the land we're on, and naming some of the difficulties around diversity and equity and inclusive programming that institutions have. So I was like, no, I don't want any curator or programmer. I'm even going to step back, but you need to fund these people. And here is the last iteration of the facilitated talks we have. So you can see that they grew on a 6-week level. I'm so sorry that I went over time, but I'll leave it to questions and answers if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pamela, for that amazing presentation.
Thank you, Karen,
for sure, we'll get to talk more about it during the conversation afterwards. So next, our third speaker is Marija Kitenke Banza, who is a Canadian Congolese artist based in Montreal. He was born in Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and holds degrees from the Académie des Beaux-Arts de Kinshasa, École supérieure des Beaux-Arts de Nantes Métropole, and the Université de La Rochelle. In 2010, he was awarded the first prize of the Biennial of Contemporary African Art at Dakar and received a Sobi Award in 2020. He has exhibited at the Muséum Dauphinois in France, Museum of Contemporary Art in Denmark, Art Gallery and NGBK in Germany, Biennale Internationale de Casablanca in Morocco, Fondation Blachère, France, Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, and the Montreal Museum of Contemporary Art. He is represented by Gallery Hugues Chabonneau. Over to you, Marija. Oops.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Karen, and I'm so happy to be here. And thanks so much to Griffin Art Project, and I'm so happy to speak with another panelist. And I would just tell you to be kind with me because my English is not perfect, and I tell Karen about that. But I will try to be better with my English. And I will share. Just give me a second to share my screen. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh yes. Okay. Great. Okay, and I will to speak about to you about my work today, and the title I give about my presentation is the Territory, Memory and History, 1001 Way to Talk About It. But for me, the one most important is to share to you, before to share to you my work and to speak with you about my work, I need to give you a little story about my country, the place I born, and the territory I was before to come in Canada. I think so. It's very important to understand the place I'm from. They say I'm from currently I'm from Congo, but it's very important for me to understand this place and to understand a little bit the history about this place. It's gonna help you to understand my work. And here I will show you the map. It's a map about before, like this. The title say the entity in Africa which exists and differentiated between 1500 before Christ and after. After that, it's like to say before the colonization. And like you see, it's not just for Africa, but in different places in the world before the European colonization. You have a different kingdom, you have the small one, the big one. And like here you see the two kingdom is very important for me. I'll show you. You have a Congo kingdom and the Luba kingdom that's empire, that is, they say the Luba state. Before my father is from the Luba, the place they call the Luba state is from this empire, and my mom from this is an empire they call Congo kingdom. And when the colonization coming, we have the Kingdom of Belgium. He was our king in the first, when the Belgian, because Congo country was the part of the Belgian colonization. And we have the King of Belgium was our king, but he never been in Congo. He never going to visit Congo. Since he died, since he take Congo like his territory, the own territory, because Congo became the part of the Belgian territory just after he died. And at 185, they decided in the Berlin Conference to divide Africa between the European power, and that the place, the King of Belgium, he have the Congo for him, because before the Berlin Conference, the people was fighting to decide why Leopold II was the only one decide about to use the Congolese territory. But for Berlin Conference, when they divide Africa, the American and German help Leopold II to have the Congolese territory just for him himself. And here you have the part of Africa divide after the Berlin Conference. You have the country you see in the middle, Congo Belge, that the country, that the space was just for the Leopold II. And this space, it's 80 size multiple for, if you need to see that with the Belgium is a space, and it's very big than Belgium space and very big than French space too. But it was just for one man, Leopold. And this is very interesting because when I was making many research in the Belgium and Fine Art Museum of the Royal King Fine Art Museum in Belgium, Tervuren, that's called Musée de l'Afrique Centrale, I see this document was saying Leopold was needing the money, 25 billion of Belgian franc, and because of Belgium give them this money, they decide after he died, he needs to give the Congo to the Belgium. That's why we became the Belgium colonization. And all of my work, I was studying how the power exchange the territory and how the power, the influence about power, changing the person, changing the identity, how that power of my the Congolese territory, changing the person I am now, and or transform or create the person I am now. And when I speak with Karen about my work, I choose some of work I need to speak with you today to show you how I decide to talk about this the empowerment of territory and empowerment of colonization administration and Catholic administration, how it change the territory I born and how it create the person I am now. And I will show you one of my projects called the National Museum of Africa. And the idea on this project, it was to when I travel, I'm going to France to study. When I arrive in France, I already know in a different museum in Europe, they have some object from Africa. But when I going to study in France, I stay 9 years in France. I was traveling in Europe and to see different museums, and it helped me to see how the colonization, the way they take many things in many objects in Congo, it was very big. It was very big. That was I was thinking before, and I see in different museum, the different sculpture or mask was given to the priest was working in Africa first. And in my family, my grandfather is the chief of the village of my mom. But they don't teach us every traditional ways they are doing before, but they teach us to be the good Catholics. They teach us to be the good Christian. And to see the object in the museum in New York, this object was the priest give this object to the museum because they was thinking it's gonna be great, the museum have this object and many people see that. It gave me just the idea to say, but there was the same priest told us to not use again this object, but it's the same priest, they take this object and they give this object to the museum. And I was seeing how the institution, the museum-like institution, not just the structure, the battlement, but the institution museum was working in the Europe. And I was seeing how different institution in the Africa, there was just to make the copy of the museum institution in Europe as working. And I decided to create my own museum. And this installation called the National Museum of Africa is, it was like humoristic ways, because when you say the National Museum Africa, Africa is not a country, but many people was, when I was meet people in Europe, many people was asking me the question like, you know, when you're from Congo, they ask you the question about Senegal, about Gabon, about other country in Africa. It's like Africa is a country. And I was every time to tell people, no, I don't know how Gabonese people live. I don't know Gabonese culture because I'm from Congo. I say, oh, we was thinking, you know, I say, no, Africa is not a country, it's a continent. And I'm not traveling around Africa to tell you I know all countries from Africa. That's why I decided to say, I will call this project the National Museum Africa. And also because we share the history about colonization. The colonization was the same to our continent, and it gave many, it disturbed the whole territory in the same time and the same ways. And for this museum, the way it's work, its installation, it take a place in different territory, in different country, in different space. And here I will show you the last one I made in Montreal in the place called Casabianca. It's a place, from two collectioners, they decide to have they buy a space. In the downstairs, you have a gallery space. In the first floor, you have the home, where the place where they live. Just pardon me. Okay, sorry. They have the place where they live. And it was very interesting when they invite me, I say, oh, they invite me first for another project. But I decided to say, I need to show my project, the National Museum of Africa, because it was the first time for me to show that in Montreal, in Canada. And in this place, the way I work for the museum, I have a website. You can go into the website if you have a time for the National Museum Africa. You can, the idea is the museum need to work like a real museum. The people, when they come in, I share with you on the conversation the link of the museum. And the way it's working, it's people, when they coming, they need to think they coming in the real museum. But when they come inside of the museum, you see the space is empty. You have all text like in the real museum. You have all things, you have a title of exhibition, you have the name of the curator, you have some like a guide for the guide tour, you have everything like in the real museum. But when you go inside, you see nothing. You just seeing the cartel with the description of the object. And every time they say, just give me a minute, I need to read this, the translation.
Marie James.
Sorry,
sorry, you have 1 minute left.
Yeah, 1 minute left. Yeah, you have a description say this work is loaned to Musée de Quai Branly à Paris. This work, this object is loaned to the Brooklyn Museum in New York. I give the people the place to see and to see the emptiness of how I grow up. The emptiness to doesn't know this object staying in Europe. We still live with our culture, but something of our culture does disappear because they stole the object. But I don't use the word stole. I use the word every museum use to say they learn object, but in the real world, they don't learn object. They stole object. But for me, it was the way for this project. Here is in Montreal and here is in France. And in France, like you see, I put the audio guide. People can listen someone speak about the object, like the object is present, but the object doesn't be present in the museum. For me, it was very interesting for this project to speak about how the colonization erased some of the part of our culture in different countries in Africa, and for my culture in Congo, and how this administration from the colonization and the Catholic Church changed the person I'm here now in front of you, and they give me another identity about of this history. And we're gonna speak like Karen said. Just I think so. Now it's my minute is finished.
I'm afraid so.
Yes, okay. And we will speak about another project after with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Marija. So our last speakers today are Jen Sunshine and David Ng of Love Intersections. Love Intersections is a Vancouver-based media arts collective made up of queer artists of color dedicated to using collaborative art making and relational storytelling to address systemic racism in our communities. Jen Sunshine speaks for a living, but lives for breathing art into spaces, places, cases. She is a nerdy, queer, Taiwanese interdisciplinary artist, activist, facilitator, and community mentor based in Vancouver. David is a queer feminist, media artist, also a co-creative director with Jen of Love Intersections. His current artistic practices grapple with queer, racialized, and diasporic identity and how intersectional identities can be expressed through media arts. His work has also recently included collaborations with Primary Colors Couleur Primaire, which is a national initiative to put Indigenous arts practices at the center of the Canadian art system through the leadership of Indigenous artists supported by artists of color. Over to you guys.
Great. Thank you, Karen. And I'm so excited. I saw quite a few of my Primary Colors colleagues are attending this conference. So thank you for that introduction. Yeah, so as Karen mentioned, Jen and I are the co-artistic directors of Love Intersections. Before we begin, I wanted to acknowledge that Jen and I are beaming this this presentation from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And in light of recent events here in BC, for those who are not in BC, we wanted to highlight the work of the land defenders at Fairy Creek. The BC government, despite signing the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, has continued to authorize the logging of old growth forests in the entire province, but specifically there's a heightened tension right now, violence right now in Fairy Creek. And so we wanted to highlight the work of the land defenders. There's a link, the organizers have put together a GoFundMe link, so I'm going to drop it in the chat if people can donate.
Okay, so our apologies. We have just come from a 3-day film production. So we were filming for 14-hour days this week. So we're a little bit fried. But I'm going to
do our best.
We're going to do our best and pull this presentation together. And I'm just going to share our slides here. Yeah, so Love Intersections is a media arts collective. We're community-based, and we produce intersectional and intergenerational stories primarily through documentary film that centers the stories of QT BIPOCs. Today we're going to be kind of talk about our filmmaking practice and philosophies that kind of grounds how we go about making our films, and all of it is rooted in relationship building and collaboration.
Yeah, and maybe we'll start with our sort of how we started. Love Intersections, Jen and I were used to work for an organization called Out on Screen, which runs the Out in Schools program. And we, because of the work that we were doing, Out on Screen has a seat on the Vancouver School Board's Pride Advisory Committee. At the time, the Pride Advisory Committee was recommending some changes in some of the homophobia policies to be more inclusive to trans and non-binary folks. And one of the clauses that they wanted to include, and which is now, 7 years ago, I think quite common, is having a gender-neutral bathroom in all schools across the school district. And one of the things that happened is that it touched the nerve of a particular demographic of people, and Jen and I are very intentional when we mention the race of this people, and you'll understand why in a moment. But it touched the nerve of the conservative Chinese evangelical Christian community, which is a community that I know very well because I grew up in that community. And so because the process, the policy process got protested quite heavily, there was a lot of media representations or media reports on the whole
quote unquote controversy.
Yeah,
which was quite frankly very racist because they, they painted Chinese people as a monolith, and because the people that protested us, were predominantly Chinese parents. And we always tell the story in the context of of love intersections, because this is the impetus and our origin story, if you will. So that was in 2013, 2014.
Yeah, and one of our frustrations in that was, Jen and I didn't see ourselves represented either on the opposing side, as queer Asian people. We didn't see our side on the opposing side, and also, we started also hearing a lot of racist comments from the supporters of the policy, who were mostly white queers. And Jen and I both heard, comments such as like, what makes your culture so conservative, right? And similarly, as Jen mentioned, the media representations, there was literally a headline that said ethnic Chinese protest policies, LGBT policies again. And we were noticing how hypocritical this was, because 4 months prior, in Langley, which is a white suburb in BC, a very similar controversy happened with white Christians. And of course, the white Anglo-Saxon Christianity wasn't named in the media representations.
Yeah, and if I could paint a picture of those very long school board meetings, I remember sitting in the school board meeting room, and I'm sitting with my so-called LGBTQ2S community behind us, with our rainbow placards, and sitting directly across from me were people that looked like me, that could ostensibly be my parents or my grandparents. And what we found was that there was a missing link, which was that there was a common denominator between the us versus them, which is love. And so that's, the parents were protesting out of love for their children, and so were we. And we wanted to look at and examine the love that's at that intersection, even if we disagreed on how that looked.
Yeah, and that was sort of the genesis of Love Intersections. Jen and I told our own stories out of a response to this. Jen, you can go to the next slide. And we recognized also, if our stories weren't being told, what other queer QT BIPOC stories also should be told. And so we started Love Intersections as a way to, as a platform to highlight these intersectional marginalized stories in our community. And we wanted to do it, of course, addressing some of the problematic experiences that we had of the ways that we were misrepresented. And so some of our core philosophies that we started off with is to do work by invitation only, and also in collaboration, and to develop the process of art making in collaboration, genuine, sharing the directorialship with our participants.
Because we recognize that traditionally the documentarians often parachute into marginalized and remote communities to tell their stories for them, and that is not a practice that David and I found is not how we go about doing things. So how that looks is giving full veto power to participants and the subjects, if you will, of the films. And this comes at a huge financial risk with grant funders, because we distribute power laterally as opposed to top down. Yeah.
I'll also just quickly mention, because I know that we're going to get into this a little bit too, is that a lot of times this type of process-based social practice, we don't really necessarily fall into traditional social practice. But we also don't really fall into community art, right? And we also don't fall into some of the other media arts funding. And so some of the challenges that we fight against in terms of the ways that the art system is set up for a certain type of commodification is something that Jen and I are trying to challenge in terms of our own organizing and facilitating of this type of cultural production.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to just quickly breeze through some of the film titles that we created in our earlier years. We have kind of stages of our organization. Regalia, Pride and Two Spirits, featuring Dwayne. We have The Politics of Sexy, featuring Namande, who is David's dear friend.
she's a good friend of mine, and I just wanted to quickly mention I'm excited about the South African connection too, because I actually went to school at the University of Cape Town, which is where I met Namande. And so that collaboration has also unfolded into several projects as well.
We did a film with BLM Vancouver. Carla in Haifa was one of our most beloved because it's a tearjerker. It's a mother-daughter relationship, and talking about both conflict but also acceptance of a queer daughter. Amar, Deaf is an Identity, who Amar actually approached us, kind of cold calling us, and asked if we had any deaf representation on our team or in our storytelling. And so this was a very prime example of how we worked with someone through invitation, and by osmosis. Then there was there was a lot of community buy-in within the deaf and hard of hearing community. We also learned a lot through Amar in terms of how we caption films, the right font, the right size of the font, what color t-shirt, what color font you wear, what color t-shirt the ASL's signing has to be wearing, and all of our films from there, from henceforth, would have hard-coded captioning as well.
Jen, we have 1 minute. Do you want to go to Value Co-op?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly mention, this is sort of Love Intersections, some our most recent work that we're going to be doing, ongoing work. Jen and I, along with 16 other artists, co-founded the Vancouver Artists Labor Union Cooperative in late 2019. And we were invited into to lease the studio space in the Lim Sai Hor Khao Mok Association building. And we got invited there because I've worked in the building for, 21 years. And one of the things, when we moved into the Chinatown neighborhood, we had long conversations about what the responsibility that it comes with that, because artists in Vancouver and elsewhere have played a role in gentrifying and displacing people, residents, and other folks in the area. And so Jen and I are part of the Community Projects Working Group, and we're doing a collaboration, ongoing collaboration with the Lim Association, where we'll be digitizing their archives, building a website for them. Jen, do you want to just quickly show the next slide, camaraderie? I just wanted to share this because other folks were talking about archive. This came out of a conversation that I had with one of the elders at the Lim Association. They showed me this article because the second floor of the building allegedly was, or I think it used to be a public bath for Chinese laborers. And when I read this article, it's quite racist. It was in 1907, and it talks about just how dirty Chinese people were. And but if you read it against the grain, you can also hear the Chinese Empire Reform Society, which was the original inhabitants of the building. They were also trying to build a community, and also showing fighting against the racism that they were experiencing in this segregated area of Chinatown. And so I created this piece as a part of Paul Wong's Pride in Chinatown to highlight the camaraderie and resiliency of the neighborhood. So yeah, I'll just leave it there. I just wanted to add that example as sort of one of the works that has come out of this collaborative relational process that we're going to be doing for at least another year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen and David. I guess now I'll just introduce our respondent, Usha Sijarim, who lives and works in Johannesburg, South Africa, who is a conceptual and socially engaged artist and uses found and common objects to communicate complex and simple ideas around the domestic position of women. She has completed a number of public art commissions and has had more than 8 solo shows and exhibited in various local and international platforms. Her work is represented in numerous private and public art collections, and she will be moderating the panel, The Color Black, at next week's Worldings conference.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everybody, all the way from the bottom of the continent that Marija described, all the way from South Africa. I'm based in Johannesburg. Thank you to Griffin Art Projects and Urban Shaman for hosting this platform and for having me here as a respondent. I was so moved by how the entire process was started with prayer and blessings. And I just kept on asking myself, what if the world started everything in this way, by asking our eyes to see with kindness and filling our hearts with compassion, and what a different place we would be at in this world if that is how we approached everything. I was also moved very much by how every single speaker has acknowledged the ancestral land that they occupy and work on. And in South Africa, particularly, land is such a contentious issue. There's huge movements to redistribute land or land restitution. Recently in the news, there was a story about a woman from Cape Town who is in her 90s and waiting to be moved into a home that was taken away from her during apartheid. And how for some reason she didn't get the home that she was supposed to. And I just kept on thinking that here she is in her 90s. She's been waiting the past 20, 30, 40 years for a home that belongs to her. And this hasn't yet happened. How much more time does she have before she's able to occupy that space? So it's very endearing for me to hear how ancestral land has been acknowledged, which I don't think as South Africans we have thought about whose land it is that we are occupying, and we're so far from acknowledging that. Marija said that there's 1,001 ways to talk about history. And I think, Karen, you mentioned how history is told and remembered, and the history that the theme of this conference is about, and also a history that dominates so much of where we are right now, is a colonial history. And the colonial history is about power, it's about control, it's a capitalist system, it's an exploitative way of living, it's non-respecting. And we're in a place now where we are asking questions, and a lot of the questions are coming from the presentations that have been given, is how do we recover culture? How do we, I think Marissa said, how do we reimagine ways of being and thinking? The predicament that we are in now with COVID tells us how disconnected we are from ourselves, from the earth, from each other. So how do we reimagine ways of being and thinking? Recently, I met somebody who said to me that she's shifted from describing herself as a noun to describing herself as a verb. So it's so much about what she does more than what her noun is. So she's seeing herself as a doer. And so I'm asking, as artists, as many of the presentations have been, how are we using art to disrupt the colonial narrative? There's been some terms that I wrote down here. Art as creative resistance, limiting imaginaries. Another theme that has come, I wanted to mention that Karen, your theme of imperfect constellations fits so well with the Center for Less Good idea. Like, I love the idea that it's not a perfect constellation. It is a connection that we have across so many levels, but that we acknowledge the imperfection of this constellation, just like the Center for Less Good idea. We're embracing the mistakes and embracing the things that don't work. And yeah, how different this world would be if we if we highlighted that more. Another theme that seemed to come up quite a bit is, I think from Pamela, the title of one of your works was Identity in a Foreign Place. And how many of us, so it's the theme of belonging or non-belonging, as Marissa said, and you said, where did I see culture and people like me? This need for ourselves to find familiarity. And Marija said something. It was Jenny and David who said that we didn't see ourselves represented. So the search continuously to fit in, and how we want to belong, we want to be loved ultimately. Marija said how power changes the person I am now and changes my identity. And if I just go back to this reclaiming of ourselves, and whether we use this power towards our own empowerment, or do we become victims? I'm not sure if it was a language thing, but Marija said, as he referred to King Leopold, he referred to our king. And this really struck me, and maybe it's a language thing, but this very cruel leader who was responsible for so much of pain, to be describing him as our king really struck me. And maybe it's how power changes the person that I am ultimately, right? I think Jen and David, and I love Jen and David, how you complete each other's sentences. You talk so much about your relationship. You spoke about you spoke about how we distribute power. That power is something that you are sharing with everybody, and giving everybody veto in the films, and how different this is from a colonial kind of assertion of power, of holding on to control, right? I was struck also by Marija's comment about Africa as a country, and the Western perspective of this monolithic continent as one country, and the stereotype of African, but how the irony of that is evident in the European divvying up of the country and deciding who owns which part, and how also things are presented with falsity, where artifacts and artworks were essentially stolen, but presented as a loan, and how much else has been stolen from Africa, how much of that cultural richness has been stolen, and how does that change who it is that I am and changes my identity. There was something that I wanted to ask, which came up quite early on, around the definition of settler in Canada, because I was just comparing that to maybe Fanon's definition of like the settler and the native, and it seems like a settler, and somebody can maybe answer that, that the settler and native are synonymous, maybe, and maybe I've got it wrong. I don't know how much time I have, but maybe I wanted to share something that was related to one of Marissa's projects, which I saw earlier, which you touched on but didn't quite present, was around food and eating of food, and how the Western world is disgusted by Filipinx some delicacies, I think. But I wanted to share a story of when my gallerist visited my gallery in downtown Johannesburg. I took him for lunch around the corner to Pakistani. It's not even a restaurant. It's a cafe that what we call a cafe, a takeaway, where there's very like plastic tables with plastic kind of tablecloths. And he sat down and we ordered curry. And as he sat down, he whispered to me and said, "Where's the cutlery?" And I said, "There's no cutlery. There's a wash basin in the corner where you can go and wash your hands so that you can eat with your hands." But I think ultimately it is about how we share our culture with each other and share the power, like that was said earlier. I enjoyed very much Brendan and Hassan's presentations, and was struck by the fact that they came together because of what they described as race issues. I mean, as a South African, this is all too familiar for us, right? It seems like our entire identity is based on race issues, not only during apartheid, but especially post-democracy. Yeah, perhaps I can end with, Jen, one of your words that I read in your biography, where you said that you prefer not to call people out, but to call people in. It's just such a shift around our role as artists and educators and activists to educate, to inform, but that we do so in the same way that this whole program was started, and we do so with compassion, with kindness, and with the aim of building each other rather than tearing each other down. Thank you.
Thank you, Usha, for your wonderful reflections on today's panels and their presentations. I guess we're kind of behind on time, but I'd like us to kind of still have a conversation, just maybe a shorter one, maybe about 10 minutes or so of the conversations, and then we'll open it up for the audience Q&A. I guess first, I had sent some opening questions, and maybe I'll just start with the first one, and then we can see where we go from there. So what are the different ways that you connect with your community, and or to build community? So how does community activism cross over into your practice? Maybe we can start with, Jen and David, since you last presenters, and you do talk about that. So maybe you can expand a little.
Yeah, so the question was, how do we connect with our community? I'm thinking of, and I'm also thinking about Usha's comment about representation, because that's all, that is how we started. But I'm thinking about the last project that we did, Yellow Peril, Queer Destiny, which was a 20-minute documentary on a local drag artist named Made in China. And we used the 5 elements in traditional Chinese medicine as a metaphor to talk about and envision queer East Asian diasporic futures, right? And that film also turned into our first solo show, Yellow Peril, The Celestial Elements, which was at the Sum Gallery in Vancouver's Chinatown. And it opened in February 2020. I don't know if people remember what happened in February 2020, but it closed on April 4th, 2020. And we had and so the gallery had to shut in mid-March. And all of a sudden, this exhibit that we had put together on queer East Asian diasporic culture in Chinatown, when there was all of this xenophobic violence in like literally blocks away from the gallery. The Chinese Cultural Center was vandalized with lots of xenophobic graffiti. All of a sudden, that future shifted very dramatically, as did our artworks, right? And so one of the things that we did was we started hosting we hosted a closing dialogue on Queer East Asian futurities to connect with folks about, hey, what does this look like now in this new space that we're in? Yeah, Jen, is there anything you wanted to add? Maybe
Well,
hop,
I
hop,
mean,
top.
Karen, you asked about how like community activism crosses over into, you know, our own practice. I think like because Dave and I have worked together in close, like so intimate for so long that we do literally complete each other's sentences and quite like literally read each other's minds. Through that process, I learned that there's so much like just overall administrative work that it entails to be an artist. And so how that seeped into my own kind of artistic practice is I wanted to transfer that knowledge into a kind of mentorship. And so in 2019, I co-produced the current Feminist Electronic Art Symposium mentorship, where we mentored a cohort of BIPOCs, women, non-binary and queer and trans artists. And we literally taught them like weekly sessions of how to produce culture. And that involves like grant writing, budgeting, you know, networking, and like running multi-day events and like fundraising and development. We also learn how to do taxes, right? But I think perhaps more than anything, you know, besides the importance of taxes, we also learn how to like truly collaborate. And I think we can all agree that like through collaboration, creative and also just conflict arise. And that is not something that I run away from. In fact, David and I run towards conflict, not in a like we chase conflict kind of way, but in the way that we recognize that conflict or tension between people is productive, and that we can utilize that productivity and actually break through some of the social norms or some of the like codes that we find ourselves hiding behind. And so we can actually develop more intimacies, more deeper and deepen our relationships with one another. That has been like my greatest learning through this past like 7 years.
Thank you. And I guess like, if I can ask Marissa the same question, but also to bring in the pedagogy, the teaching and education. I'm just thinking about what Jen just said about starting up this mentorship program. So for you, like community and education as activism.
Yeah, thank you, Jen and David for those lovely thoughts. Yeah, for sure, Karen. It does connect with pedagogy. In my practice, I use art as a form of inquiry. And as a form of engagement. And I like what Jen just said about art teaching others how to make culture, like from the nitty gritty to organizing multi-day events to taxes. Like those are very pragmatic concerns. And a big issue is access, where many Indigenous and people of color communities don't have access to equipment, to studio space, to mentors in the community. In some of my nonprofit work, I work with Kapisanin, which is an arts-based youth-led organization that focuses on cultural production for and with Filipino youth. And connecting mentors with emerging artists, because there are so few of us who have stuck with it, who have had the capacity to stick with it because of systemic racism or lack of resources. So pedagogy is a part of it, and also material resources, like connecting communities with resources in order to make these things happen. So as a cultural worker, as an educator, as someone who, as an arts administrator, those are ways in which I can connect culture making with BIPOC communities, especially Filipinx youth.
Thank you. And then I guess I'll ask Marija, because I know that you're also the education officer for the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Montreal, and how you bring like sort of that aspect of education, and also what Marissa was saying, the access I know that you've been trying to put programs on to bring communities of color into the museum, or the museum to the communities. Can you kind of share a little bit?
Oh, it's a big work, and and it's a, I don't know how to share that. You know, I'm working in the museum, but I'm not the director of the museum. I'm not decide where to put the money for the program, where to put the money for different kind. And the way I'm still working until today is to, how I can say that, it's just to see where is the space, where is the buffer, the space. Oh, I put something to make my own project and to make the educational project with some community. And the way I learned to, now I work on things, so it's 6 years I'm working in the museum, and I learned also what different community need. You know, some community, when they come to ask me, they need to have a panel. Another community need to have a artistic workshop creation with family. It's different. It's helped me to understand different community, because we from the I can say the BIPOC, but we don't have the same history. We don't have the same. We don't thinking the same way. Like people was thinking, like I was say, all Black people thinking the same way because we are Black. No, and it helped me to learn different specificity about different community. And I like I say, I don't have a formula. I try, it's not work, and I retry again. I make a project, it's not work, and I retry again. For me, I think so. That's the way I am working about different projects. To speak with someone and to fight inside of my institution, for them, when they came, they have a possibility, they have a money, they pay, they need to be paid, not free. That's the first thing for me. When I work with someone from the BIPOC people, they need to be paid. It's not for free. And the another way I put for my different project, when I'm starting project with BIPOC people, I need to start in the project first before me to give the project to my other colleagues. I need to make what do you say, confiance in English? Oh, I'm sorry. What do you say? Just give me a minute, I will try. Oh, trust. I need to create a trust between the people I'm calling to come to the museum. That's why every time I'm starting first the project with them, before me to tell them, oh, you can work with my other colleagues with this project, you can go into this department. I need first to be, we need to be trust, confidence, you know, we feel in confidence, we know the space, that's the way I try to make the project. And but it's also difficult because in an institution I work, I think so it's for whatever people from the BIPOC people, they work in an institution. When you are alone, they give you all mission, like now you become a priest, you need you know, or BIPOC people. It's become like it's very hard, because when I immigrate in Canada, every time I say that like a joking, when I came here to live here, my mission was not to work from BIPOC people. It was like, I'm coming just to live for myself, to work for me, to, you know, just for me. But now it's becoming my mission, because yes, I'm working in this institution, everywhere I'm going, it's become whatever you want and you don't want that, it's becoming like your mission to work, to make, because when I work with the young kid, they see me like a mentor, and whatever I like that, or I don't like this, it's becoming like interview for me to say, oh, I need to be perfect about it. I need to make a project for them, because they see me like a mentor. They see me, you know, I made a project with someone in the museum. They asked me, oh, it's first time we see someone Black is not a security guardian. how you do that to do not be the security and to work in the office. And that give me the thing to say, oh yes, whatever I like or no, I don't like this, but people when they come in, they see me like a mentor and I need to work about that. But it's very hard. You don't have a formula. You need to try. It's like an essay. You try, it's not work, and you find another way to for that to work.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll get to Pamela now about, I guess, you as an educator as well, and how you've worked with community, worked with education, and I guess building the trust with the communities and the collective that you work with.
Yeah, I guess, so in terms of my day job, I'm in a high school environment. It's an alternative school environment. I just finished 11 years at Seed Alternative, and Seed has a very a legacy. Alternative schools have a legacy, or particularly around this from the 68 period. We're the oldest alternative, publicly funded alternative high school in Canada. So outside of the one in the UK that the model they all follow, slipping my mind right now. Anyway, so I knew what I was doing in that environment, but when I go into the art world, I found that a lot of my students who had finished with me and they were in first, second, or third year, they would face a lot of structural inequities in post-secondary institutions, of course, because much like my experience, still there's quite a bit of work to do around content development and delivery around that, perhaps, and not just making it culturally relevant pedagogy, but also looking at things like equity, and I mean about access, right? So it does boil down to access, much like what Summerhill, yes, Summerhill, thank you, Marissa. It does boil down to access, because those models that were developed off of Summerhill in the UK, and there's a fair bit smattering around North America and of course Europe, but the point being is that they were not modeled about people like us. So you have things like now organizations like Bush Gallery, right, or Daphne in Montreal, right? So it's specific now. That's what I mean. Like, that's what culturally relevant pedagogy looks like in the art world, is that it's equitable and inclusively shaped, right? For the, not just the viewer, but the actual participant. So a lot of my practice with collectivity basically emerged out of probing scholarship that wasn't there about people like us, about artists like us, really looking at some of the emergent patterns of artists of color, particularly African-American communities of artists, members of the African-American artist community, where what did they specifically do in order to close gaps of understanding for themselves, to also bridge a opportunity to get platforms. So I see a structural issue, and I can only speak for what I'm doing with my work and my collectivity and whatnot, but I see that there are structural issues, still a long way to go in the Canadian contemporary art world around serving and letting us take up place and space, right? And this kind of permission-based culture that exists, that's very, very deeply entrenched in Canada, right? And we see the reckoning that is happening, not just because of post George Floyd, but also Indigenous lives, right? So how can we not learn? It's not like, of course they have their, what is that called? The model minority, but I'm not here for the model minority. If my Indigenous and friends and my Black artist friends are not being served in a manner that is based on trust and reciprocity, then who am I to get an opportunity? That's capitalism's win. That's capitalism's win, right? And I'm not for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to, just because of the time, and I've got like other questions, But I think maybe what we'll do right now is just get to some of the audience questions, and then we can kind of continue talking. So Jazz, if you can kind of jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an audience member named Mandeep who is going to ask his question out loud. So Mandeep, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. My question is for Morija. Morija, I can understand, I mean, every artist is an independent agent and can choose exactly what they want to do in their art. There are a number of choices, okay? Now, it really baffles me, that you chose a very diplomatic, tactful word like loan, okay, when you are trying to disrupt, the colonial project. It's very nice. It's very tactful, language, okay. But I think the National Museum of Africa, when viewers take a look at the tag, when they see the word stolen, I think it would make a bigger impact than this word, very nice, tactful word loan. I'm wondering if you went through a struggle with that, or was it not a struggle for you? But I mean, loan versus stolen. I mean, the thing is, at the Berlin conference in 1885, the European powers, they did not care nor pay any attention to tribal boundaries. Now, what happened was, say, take Uganda, for example. Uganda got its independence, okay, in 1962, I believe, and it went through a period of enormous tribal conflict because of the haphazard way that the colonial powers, the British, carved up the country of Uganda without paying any attention to tribal groups living in that area, And so, I mean, my question is, I think you've been very nice using the word loan, okay? I think you've been too nice, considering what the Belgian King Leopold did. I mean, everything is relative, my friend, okay? And then of course there is the whole issue of being a member of the art world, the art establishment, and keeping them happy, as well, right? It would have been a really big problem for them to see the word stolen, I imagine, Anyway, my friend, can you share your thoughts with, regarding your decision? Loan versus stolen.
Very interesting. If you ask the question to my mom and my dad, you tell them, do you think your son is very nice to the political historic about Congo and with Belgium? They will tell you no. And the thing they will tell you about me, about what I'm thinking about the politics with colonization, I think so you will don't understand me. You will just be I don't. It's a long story, but the way I was thinking, when I was living in Congo,
yeah,
I was tell my father and my mom, I will never live in Europe or North America. And the first time I was thinking to going to study my art school, it was in South Africa. And I have a chance to have a visa to going to Europe to study, whatever. I was in France. And when I came in France, I was because, my hero in Congo is Patrice Lumumba. I don't know if someone know Patrice Lumumba here. If nobody know Patrice Lumumba is the person helped us to have independence in Congo. The idea he have about independence, it was differently. and the Belgian people kill him to put him in the, what do you say, acid in English? Acid. It's acid. They put him the body in the in acid, just to be shortly. And for me, the idea about my work, it was to how I can push the discussion very, very deeper. Not just if I say, when you came into my museum, you see the cartel,
Yeah.
you see the description, and you see stolen to Musée du Quai Branly. The discussion is stopped because you understand it's stolen. And we don't have time to discussion because you read stolen and you stop and you go out. But if you know the real story, you know it's not loan, it's stolen. But if you read in the cartel, loan in the museum in Paris. And I changed the story because in the real story, in the real life, I don't have a power to take this object. You know, I discovered in the Fine Art Museum in Montreal, the mask from the village of my mom. And I told you before, the village of my mom, the chief of this village is my grandfather. I discovered in the museum I'm working actually now in Montreal, the mask from the village of my mom. And I was asked the curator, I say, oh, I can take it because I speak with my grandfather. He tell me I can take it. And the museum tell me, you can take it, it's not for you. That's the real life. In the real life, that's the power. I don't have the power, but in my work, I change the narrative when I say, I loan the object. I don't loan the object. I know they stole the object. But to say I loan the object, that's why I call it the National Museum of Africa. In my work, I take the power to decide to loan the object. And when we have a discussion, the discussion go deeper. Because when we have a discussion with someone come in the museum, and he discover they don't loan object, they stole object. And now we can discuss about the real story about this object. And that's the way I discovered to my work to say, if I need to go deeper with something become the time of the colonization, I need to use the irony, because the irony, you know, like everybody, like you, like when you saw me, when every people, they coming to see my work, they say, oh, it's very nice, this guy. You know, he talk about nice thing. It's very, for me, the idea is come, sit down with me. You think I'm nice. And after that, I punch you. Because when I punch you, yes, because when you came, the time you realize the time you realize I'm very hard with you about what's happening in my history, you take a seat. Because if I give you the first thing I said I stole, you just read and you go back. And I never speak with you about how you stole that, the people you kill when you stole that. We can discuss, but if I tell you, you loan, we loan that, you sit, and now I can explain you about that. And that's the way I found for my work, it's worked better for me. And trust me, the last time I put the National Museum of Africa in Montreal, we received for the exhibition, it was in 1 month, we received, I think so, 100 visits about the exhibition. And every day I'm in the museum, and every day I speak with people. Different people from Africa, Europe, North America, whatever, different people. And trust me, sometimes we have a long discussion. And sometimes people thinking to tell me, oh, it was not bad. And I have a different discussion, but this discussion, it's coming because they stay. Because they came, they make a guide tour in the museum. I make the real guide tour. It's when you come. I make a guide, I explain you the object. You don't see the object, I explain. And that for me, that gives the powerness of the exhibition. Because I say they loan, but they don't loan. You don't see something in the object. You see the emptiness of the box. And that's become very, very powerful for me. And because the first time I started the museum, I was put, they stole. And it was like just, oh yeah, oh, we know they stole. And after that,
Yeah, I understand. I understand.
Now you understand why. And I know many people, when I show my work, they say, oh, not just the museum, another piece. My politics is, it's not to be diplomatic, it's to use the irony.
Yeah.
Or to speak about, I was saying that the real power in the life. Actually, I give you the example of the object in the museum. I can take that. It's my object from my history, from my country, from my village. I can take that because I don't have the power in the real life.
Yes.
But in my work, I mean, in my artistic work is the only place I found where I can have the power to say whatever I want, but I need to be, not diplomatically, but I need to be intelligent. The way I can use this power.
Thank you so much. You know, now that you've explained it to me, I feel that you made the right choice there, using the word loan instead of stolen. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Kara. And Kara, if you wish to ask your question out loud, you do have the ability to unmute, but I'm also happy to, oh, there we go.
Yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi might be a little choppy, but I'm going to try my best. But I have a question for all of the panelists, and this was kind of sparked by, thank you, Mandeep, for your good question. But, you know, they mentioned how it is to work against colonial narratives within the arts industry. And I'm curious what all of you think, because I know you guys are both community-based organizations or within art galleries or curating within art galleries and all of these things, you know, and I just wonder, how do you reconcile, you know, your wonderful community-based anti/decolonial work and the funding that seems to always have to come from colonial governments or institutions or art councils and all of these things. And I was wondering if this ever presents an issue for you with having to satisfy funders, or are you still free to be as radical as you guys want to be? And do you think there's a future for art galleries and artist collectives where we don't have to rely on government funding and consequently have to appease those colonial boards and institutions? Sorry, that's a multi-part question. You can answer as much or as little as you guys want.
Yeah, I could maybe take a stab at it. I'm just thinking this, I asked this question to Dr. Chandan Reddy when he did a presentation at my school, and he talked about, and this is in the US context, there has never existed in the US context a equitable redistributive justice model. That has never happened for Black people in the US. And I would argue that is the same as in Canada too, right? And so when we're talking about accessing funds, we are not under a system where there has been a decolonized access to funds. I also wanted to just maybe touch on some of the things that we've been thinking about at Primary Colors. As Karen mentioned, the project is looking at it's a project that was started by Chris Creighton-Kelly and France Trepanier to decolonize the Canadian art system by placing the Indigenous arts practices at the center of the Canadian art system. And one of the main impetuses of Primary Colors is to challenge the tokenistic gestures of representation. Right, currently, how the funding system operates is that BIPOC folks are offered one seat at the table, at a table that we didn't build, and you know, to have a chair to a table that we didn't build. Right, the entire system needs to be dismantled, and so. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but this is part of, I think, the discourse, the conversations that we're having right now, is that affirmative action and representation is just not good enough. How do we actually challenge those logics of exclusion that have excluded us in the first place? How do we actually transform the colonial transform and dismantle colonialism, right? And I think it's a particularly pressing in the forefront of our minds right now in Canada after the uncovering. I don't want to use the word discovering because the TRC has always indicated that those graves were already there, but it's really on the forefront of our minds right now. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of the thoughts that come to mind for me.
Oh, that was great. I love knowing. And yeah, it's just like, sorry, I'll let other people answer if you want to.
Kara, I can offer some thoughts just briefly. With my work with Kapisanan, this is something that we have struggled with, and mostly with in naming and how accountants and others would describe Kapisanan as a charity, and we vehemently reject the title charity, and we prefer to use nonprofit because we don't want to support that idea that we are asking for handouts from the colonial government. We are brazen with the language that we use in our grant writing. If we want to do something with non-binary queer Filipinx youth, we say just that. And we don't always get funded. But in the case of Canada Council and Ontario Arts Council, they are to be selecting peers to review these applications. And so, part of my work is being that peer and mentoring others so they can be peers who assess applications. So we're not quite there yet, but we are getting there. And I think about leaders who were working in the 1980s to push for more equitable policies amongst funding bodies like Monica Kinganyon and Richard Fung, and their work has made some waves, but the work continues.
Thank you both so much for your thoughts. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. I'm going to just jump back on here with my voice because I know we are running late and it's been just such a rich and amazing conversation. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to Karen and Jen and David and Marissa and Pamela and Marija and Usha and everybody who presented today. Thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. We can't thank you enough. And as I mentioned at the top of today's event, this is the launch event for the Worldings virtual conference. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste the link in the chat. You can register for the full conference, which is happening next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, entirely virtually and over Zoom. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so
Thank
happy.
you.
So
Thank
great.
you, everyone.
The conversations next week.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Urban Shaman.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.